Welcome everyone to our webinar on retirement planning in Australia. So as financial advisors, hands down, probably the most common thing we get asked, quite literally can be weekly, fortnightly, monthly, that we're getting asked this. And the question is, Riley, Sam, when can I retire? And for us, retirement isn't an age. It's not 60, 55, 65, 67 when you get an age pension. Everyone is completely different because it's a careful mix of cash flow and planning. We think of your situation as financial advisors like a chessboard. Now, most people today don't play chess, but we might have grown up playing chess as kids. The average person knows what a chessboard looks like and that there's different pieces on the board and certain pieces on that board can do different things, okay? Now, we think of your financial situation like a chessboard, okay? There's different pieces on the board, whether it be debt, tax, your home, your super, your estate planning, your life insurances. They all have their own role to fill within your, financial game plan individually. But what we want to do is really look at how they're connected as well. And that's really, you're in the crux, that 5-10 year window of how these are, how do all these pieces start to fit together to form that retirement plan. I'll now pass it over to Sam to run through the agenda for today, and then we'll get straight into things.
Thank you everyone for coming to our retirement planning webinar hosted by myself and Riley. Do appreciate your time in registering. So what we'll sort of cover today in our agenda is we're going to be focusing on 4 main areas. So the first area is that pre-retirement, so about 5 years out. And this focus here will be clarifying your lifestyle, building financial readiness, and then looking at section 2, the transition and at retirement, so 6 to 12 months out before entering into retirement. And the focus here will be switching paycheck sources tax efficiently and avoiding sequence risk. Next, we'll be looking at the retirement event. So this will be a focus on sustainable income, tax efficiency, estate planning, and aged care foresight. And then lastly, we'll wrap it up in retirement. And then we'll also have a Q&A for any questions you'd like to drop in the chat. For any real in-depth questions outside of the scope of today, or things that may require personal advice, you can email us privately, or we'll just take that offline and answer your questions after the webinar. But without further ado, I'll pass over to Riley to start us off.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Sam. Yeah, just to reiterate what Sam said there, we have to say this by law, but we also really mean it. Today, the focus of today is really to give you guys information. It's information and at best, general advice. Nothing we say today takes into account anyone in the audience's personal situation, okay? You would have heard it before, but we have to say it for a reason. Don't take what you hear today and just go and do things, okay? If there is some form of aspect that you're unsure about, right, feel free to ask a question, but any questions that borderline on too technical, which means nobody in here will understand except for us, or if they're getting too much like they're going to be personal advice, we can take that offline and speak with you like Sam said. This recording is going online and will be available to other people if you reach out, if there's someone you want to pass it to or you want to re-watch and so on and so forth. We can provide you with that. But yeah, we just want to stay within our sort of legal parameters that we have to. On to the first section here, everyone. So we're going to start with pre-retirement. So when we think pre-retirement, I'm talking at least 5 years out, okay? When we're talking 5-10 years out, that's going to give us a really good opportunity to define our lifestyle targets. Then from there, map out our cash flows, optimize our assets, and then really think about how we're going to manage our investment risk as we get closer and closer to the big event. So starting with the lifestyle targets, okay? Most people look at their superannuation or their assets, they start with the numbers, and then they go, can I make retirement work with these numbers? Okay. Now, what we want to do and what we suggest people do for our the clients that work with us is do the total opposite. Start with the life you want to live and then make the numbers fit around that. So first and foremost, ask yourself, when do I want to retire? Because for everyone in this room, I'm sure there are some similarities, but it's fundamentally different for most people. I encourage my clients to step into your future you. So step forward 10 years or whatever it may be into retirement and ask yourself, what do I want and what do I need? In terms of needs, there's a fixed level of living expenses that we're all going to incur, right? That's putting a roof over our head, food on the table, paying for the rates and the insurances, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the wants, that's where we're all going to differ. So some people might have travel, car upgrades, hobbies, gifts for the kids, home renovations, like you want the pool or such and such. We then want to get a big list of that. Then translate some of these things into, is this once off, like as in it's only going to happen once in 10, 15 years, like a car upgrade? Is it an annual thing that's once off per year, like maybe your rates notice, you pay that up front for the whole year? Or is it an ongoing cost that you're going to be paying weekly, fortnightly, monthly, like groceries and so on and so forth? Okay. Breaking them down like this is going to give you a really good understanding of your baseline level of expenses and then what you need beyond that, right, to live the life that you want to live. Now, once you've got all of that, you know what the figures are, ask yourself, do I expect to spend more, the same amount, or less in the first couple of years of retirement? Because for us as financial advisors, when we work with people in this stage and people, you know what I mean, at the retirement event, we find most people need to budget for a bit of a honeymoon buffer. So when you retire, we find the first couple of years of retirement, people blow out the budgets. Now, what we want to do is control that, and I'll come back to that later, but we want to plan for that, okay? So setting a small buffer like, oh, my yearly expenses might be X, I might just go an extra 10% for the first couple of years because we've got to be kind to ourselves. We're going from 40 hours a week work to potentially no work or part-time work to no work. We've got to fill in the time doing something, and a lot of the time doing something involves some form of spend. Now, at Cruise, we say cash flow is king. So without knowing what we spend, it's impossible, quite literally impossible, for us to manage longevity risk and to know whether you can retire when you want to. So as I said before, we've done your budget, and you want to do your budget and categorize your expenses into fixed and discretionary and so on and so forth. But once you've done that, I'd then create, that's what I do in my life and what I advise my clients to do, create a bucket cash flow approach. So what we do with that is we create separate accounts. You might have a mortgage still and use separate offset accounts, for example, right? For each type of expense. Now, I'm not going to talk about that too much because Sam's going to talk about that later. But what I find with a lot of retiree clients is they like to travel. There's a few countries they didn't get to go to while they were working. So we come up with a travel budget that they might like to spend each year. And then from there, say per annum, that amount that they'd like to spend is $10,000 a year. Maybe what we can do is just automate your pay. So when you get paid, right, $200 a week goes into that travel account. So that when you are overseas, you've got a predefined budget and set of parameters that you need to stick to, and you're not robbing your future self like your retirement or other objectives. From here, once we've got the buckets and we know what's going where, automation is key to smooth out when big bills come in. And what I mean by that is, look, we've all heard it, whether it's friends, family, down at the pub, whatever it may be. We go through the year, everyone's feeling good, etc., etc. We get to Christmas, or we get to end of financial year, and it's rates, it's insurances, it's regos, you've got all that in 1 month, bang. And we've always heard people go, oh, I've got no money this month, I had all those bills come in. Well, you can tell immediately what their cash flow process is. But by having the buckets approach, like you might have a house account, right, which is all the bills associated with your house, if your cash flow is automated and going towards that each pay period, when those bills come in, it doesn't matter because that account can be direct debited because it's got the right amount of money into it. So from here, right, so we know we've gone into our future self, we've now looked at our present situation and what the cash flow is going to look like in both instances. I'd encourage you to look at it and then, for example, set a date in 90 days or 6 months or 12 months to do a bit of a review with yourself or your partner, right? And stress test how you went. It's not about overdoing it and going, oh, did I overspend? Did I underspend? But it's just about seeing whether your budget was accurate. The last thing we want to do is do this on paper, not care about it, because when crunch time happens, when you are retired, you need to have built some of these good habits. Now, we've got a great understanding of your cash flow, what you need to spend. The next thing we need to be thinking about is building out a cash buffer for short-term liquidity expenses. To give you all a personal example, about 18 months ago, my partner, Danielle, and I, we had cars, not brand new, but relatively new. They blew up on the same day. Now, to save you the long story about what happened, etc., the statistical chances of two cars that are, I think hers was 3 years old, mine was 6 years old, to blow up in the same day is just absolutely ridiculous, right? And I'm not saying go out there and have two new cars worth of cash. But what I am saying is that if you don't have a cash buffer to weather some of these unexpected expenses like car, health, whatever it may be, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, okay? Because I can promise you at some point moving forward, it's going to happen. So as general rules of thumb, for people that are in their accumulation phase of life, you know what I mean, 20s, 30s, 40s, so on, I want to see for my clients at least 3 months worth of living expenses in cash at a bare minimum. So if they need 80 grand a year, for example, we're getting 3 months or 25% of that in the offset account at all times. Now, for people here or people looking to retire in 5, 10 years, that's not going to cut it. For pre-retirees, we want to be looking at building that up to at least 6 months worth of living expenses, preferably 12 months. By the time we are retired, we should definitely have 12 months worth of living expenses in liquid cash. And that's going to provide those people with that a lot of benefits, okay? The first benefit, in my opinion, is when emergencies happen, you're not drawing down on your superannuation. Now, what I mean by that is, let's go back to April when tariffs were announced and the market was down 10% in a day. Let's say your superannuation balance of $500,000 was down 10%. That's 50 grand. And then at the same time, your car blew up, right? Or was stolen, or God knows what happened, right? But let's say you've got to buy a new car and that's 50 grand. And not only that, you need to pull out $1,000 a week to live. In the space of 1 month, your superannuation account could be down 6 figures, right? Due to this lack of planning. Okay. But if you have 12 months worth of living expenses in liquid cash, although it's painful, the cash is there and you didn't need to draw extra from your super. It can also provide much more strategic opportunities. So let's say that market is down, to give you the exact same example. Retirees with plenty of cash, they can be a bit more strategic. They can go, well, my minimum drawdowns from super are only X, but I'm drawing more than that. What I'll do is I'll actually pause all my pension payments from superannuation for the next 6 months, for example. I'll draw my minimum pension payment I need to in June, and I'll live off my cash buffer while we have this volatility. Then from there, hopefully my account's recovered in 6, 9 months or whatever it may be. And then what I'll do, I'll just turn my pension payments back on and top my cash buffer back up. Okay, so that way they're not drawing down whilst the market's going down. But if you don't have your cash buffer, there's nothing you can do about this. From here, onto the fun stuff, or what I call fun, asset base. We need to look at the assets that are working for you. Now, for everyone in this room, it's going to be different. So we want to start with mapping out your assets. So that's your cash, your superannuation, your listed investments, and listed investments like shares, for example, your investment properties, your family home. Now, as a little side note, once we've got all these listed down and what they're worth, you need to remember the family home is a lifestyle asset. It's not an income producing asset. Now, it's there to provide security, roof over your head, and it will grow tax-free. But at the end of the day, you need to be aware, if you are retired and your only asset is your house and you cannot live off an age pension, the house isn't going to put food on the table. Now, that's a con in terms of a negative, right? But we can turn it into a positive. Now, for my clients that are still living in the house that they raised all their children in, they might not need a 4 or 5 bedroom home once they're 75 or whenever, right? So we plan for that and we go, okay, we can wave this magic wand, sell the house, downsize, maybe put some money into superannuation or whatever it may be that they want to do, okay? So we just need to be aware that if that's your only asset, it's not going to put food on the table in retirement. Now, once we've got all your assets listed out, we need to be thinking debts. And this is very, very important. Identifying all debts is key. So starting with home loans, investment loans, like that includes investment properties, personal loans, credit cards, zip pay. The list goes on with debts nowadays. Okay. Once we've got that, right, what debt it is, the interest rate, the amount that we owe, we want to plan the payoff order. And in my own personal life, if I ever had a debt, what I would do is try and get the best bang for my buck. Okay. And I'd do a debt snowball strategy. I would start with the debt that has the highest interest rate. Okay. And then go and pay that one off, because I know for every dollar that I put towards that, I'm going to save the most amount of interest. For some other people, depending on your situation, you might have a broker, and they might have recommended that you refinance debts into one debt that's easy and manageable and maybe a lower rate. Okay. We have to think of that at the time. The point that I want to raise here is that I often see people who work really hard. Maybe they have the family home and an investment property or something like that. They go through their working life, they pay off the home loan in 15 years or whatever it may be, right? And then just out of the habit of paying debt, once that home loan's done, they go, oh, well, what's my next debt? I'm now going to go and pay off my investment loan. This is where advice is really, really key, because we don't just want to go and do these things without a plan. It might not be in your best interest to pay off deductible debt if you can get better bang for your buck elsewhere. Okay. I do find for clients with debt, and this is just my experience working at Cruise for the last, say, 7 or so years, clients that extinguish their debts, particularly non-deductible debts, before or at retirement at the latest, definitely enjoy retirement more. It eases the emotional burden when you retire. And think about it, like, it's completely logical. When you retire, if you have a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 home loan and you're not going to work every day to pay for that loan, you're drawing it from super or whatever it may be, it can be hard to sleep at night knowing what happens if something goes wrong. The last point I want to make on debt is ask yourselves, do I need this debt in retirement? Particularly if it's deductible debt, like debt on an investment property. Will I have income to deduct this against? Or asking yourself a follow-up question to that, is there a more efficient way of doing this? Now, on to risk and asset allocation. So we're now talking about investing. So when we think about risk, we want to think about 3 different things. The first thing is the need to take on risk. How much risk do I need to take on to manage longevity or achieve my goals? And longevity means running out, right? Am I ever going to run out? So if you're managing longevity, you're having enough for the rest of your life and probably then some. Second thing, capacity to take on risk. If the markets fell, do I have the capacity to take that volatility and weather the recovery? To give you an example, the market dropped extensively in COVID 2020, 2021, down as well, not much better. 2022, it sort of felt like everything that was gained was lost, depending on what asset class you're in. And it was really only sort of late 22, 23, 24, around that time where things started to pick up. But you need to think about capacity, okay? And that really relates back to your age or how close to needing that money you are. The last thing is tolerance, and I can't do this one for you, right? Ask yourself, do I have the tolerance to weather this volatility? And that's what I call the sleep at night factor. Can you sleep at night knowing that you're on the precipice of retirement, but your superannuation's in high growth? Leading up to retirement, I find people's capacity and tolerance tends to drop, and it can even be quite drastic. The thing that we need to balance, though, is need to take on risk. You might feel like, oh, I can't deal with it. I need to be in a conservative option. I'm about to retire, etc., etc. But unfortunately, if you don't have the balance, you might not be able to go into a conservative option because you're going to run out of money at 72. Okay? So we need to balance need, capacity, and tolerance. You can see on the screen there, we've got sequence of returns. And what we want to do leading up to retirement in the early years of retirement is avoid market downturns that are going to impact our balance negatively. Now, we don't have a crystal ball and we can only control what we can control, but it's really important to know this because the sequence of investment returns will be one of the biggest impacts on your retirement and longevity overall. Okay. So to explain this slide here for you, it's on this screen over here for me. So apologies if it looks like I'm looking away. We'll start with the portfolio B, which is that green colored line there. Now you can see there, and it is a bit blurry, so apologies for that. We've got 5 years. So let's assume this person's retired. They then get an average return of 7% per annum. All portfolios have an average return of 7% per annum in this example, but they just get 7% every single year. Now we know, and you can see that curve, it's beautiful, it's smooth, goes on and on and on. They get to 90 and they don't run out of money, which is fantastic. But we know that life doesn't work like that. Your super doesn't just go 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. So let's go to portfolio C. Now, you can see there, they actually get -7% and -4% in the first 2 years. So their balance goes down early in retirement. Then after that, they get 12, 15, 22, right? Fantastic returns. And their average return is also 7. But they're running out of money in their late 80s, okay? Let's compare that with portfolio A. They shoot the lights out early in retirement. 22, 15, 12, and then they get -4 and -7. Exact same returns as what portfolio C had, just switch the order. They had great returns early in retirement. Portfolio C had bad returns early in retirement. And look at the difference. Plenty of money at 90 versus out of money at probably 87. So sequencing, whilst we can't control it, it's super, super important for us to be aware of. Last thing I'll talk about in section 1 is timing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, high level, starting early is imperative. So at least 5 years out is what I suggest when you're doing these exercises. It beats 1 to 2 years or basically on the cusp of retirement. Too often we get a lot of people reach out to us and they go, they're ready for advice, or, hey, I've just retired, or I'm retiring at Christmas and it's the 3rd of December. And for us, if the numbers don't add up, I don't have a magic wand to fix it, okay? But the earlier you start, the earlier you can see the life you want to live, what sort of metrics you have to get to, and then you know what you have to do to get there, or what you roughly can control to help push you in the right direction. Advice, I won't harp on about it, but it is good whether you speak to us or someone else, because an advisor can look at your life like that chessboard. At the end of the day, we're not educated, not like advisors are, but the general public isn't educated on all these different concepts like how superannuation, investments, life insurance, estate planning, non-estate assets, all these different things, how they're interconnected. So an advisor can help piece your chess pieces together essentially to take you from where you are to where you want to go, okay? And that might involve optimizing contributions, cancelling insurances you don't need, structuring your affairs generally, and just overall fixing those neglected areas. I think, in my opinion, the biggest value is modeling and modeling out where you are, where you want to go. And then if we do option A versus B versus C, here's the numbers in terms of how does it improve it. And that way you can be the CEO of your own financial situation. Very last thing, we've got a worksheet. So the things that I've just talked about, all the things we want you guys to really be doing 5 and 10 years out from retirement, we're going to hand that out. It'll go out automatically after today, so you can complete that. And then obviously, hopefully that puts you in good stead moving forward. I'm now going to pass it over to Sam, who's going to take you through section 2, which is transitioning to retirement. So yeah, take it away, Sam.
So Riley, and definitely cash flow is king here at Cruise. So with my sort of session talking around transitioning to retirement, the main objectives here is you want to plan your off ramp, keep your net pay steady, and boost your super efficiently while you're still working. So one of the things we see here at Cruise is why a hard stop doesn't suit everyone. Many people struggle going from full-time work and then basically going to retirement mode overnight. There's a loss of routine, purpose, social interaction. It can create stress and impact the mental health. A planned off-ramp gives you time to adjust your identity, your habits and lifestyle gradually. And we are creatures of habit, so changing to habit slowly is usually easier than flicking a switch. So an example of a phased approach to retirement is step 1, move from 5 days to 4 days per week for 2 to 3 years. And then step 2, we reduce to 2 to 3 days per week for another 2 to 3 years. This creates a smoother transition from employment income to retirement income. And then we look at linking your work days to your cash flow. Decide how many days you want to work and for how long into the lead up into retirement. And then map out the expenses on the household income and your day-to-day living. Understand what changes if you drop a day. Can you cover the fixed expenses comfortably? Do you need to adjust your discretionary spending? And that's where we really tie in your cash flow and financial modeling. And we use the financial modeling to answer those questions. Is this phased retirement path financially achievable? If not, what levers can we pull? Do we work longer? Do we spend less? Do we contribute more to super or less to super? Do we downsize? What are you willing to give up in the short term? Extra spending now to gain more security or flexibility later? So the goal is to align your desired lifestyle with a sustainable income plan. So here we have an admin checklist, basically a pre-retirement. So why does admin matter? Once you know how you'll phase out of work, you want the paperwork to support that. So getting the admin right up front avoids last-minute stress and costly mistakes. So first of all, starting with your superannuation, confirm your fund details. Look at your beneficiaries, whether you're eligible to start a pension or a TRIS. Check insurance inside of your super, life insurance, total permanent disability insurance, or income protection, and whether these need to be changed as you reduce hours. Look at your government benefits. Can you access the age pension? And what other concessions can you apply for? Looking at banking and cash flow, which Riley touched upon. Set up the appropriate bank accounts for the incoming pension payments and regular expenses. And then lastly, looking at your estate planning, making sure your wills and power of attorneys are up to date and your binding nominations are consistent with your wishes. And if all this gets too much, this is when you really need to seek advice. If you're not confident handling these steps, it's a strong sign. An advisor can help coordinate the superannuation, the tax, the Centrelink, so they all work together. So one of the areas I want to talk about is a transition to retirement strategy or a transition to retirement income stream. So who is this for? Typically available once you've reached preservation age of 60, and it basically allows you to access part of your super as an income stream while you're still working. So what are the key purposes of a TTR or TRIS? To top up your household income. So basically you replace your income if you cut back your work days and maintain your net pay. You can use it to assist debt repayment, use some of your pension income to accelerate payoff of non-deductible debt, such as your home loan, while keeping your super invested. You can enable tax-efficient contribution strategies, salary sacrifice more into super, but keep your take-home pay stable. So how it works in practice? Starting a transition to retirement income stream from your super, you continue working and you make salary sacrifice or personal deductible contributions to your super. You also need consideration to your contribution cap, how much your employer is putting in and how much you can put in up to that cap. So how does the TRIS tax and withdrawal settings work? So with the TRIS, there's a minimum drawdown of 4% of the account balance each financial year and a maximum of 10%. Now, all the withdrawals, the payments from there are tax-free, but anything it makes inside of that TRIS is still taxed at 15%, very similar to superannuation. When you do move to an account-based pension though, in full retirement, there is no maximum limit you can draw out, but there is minimum requirements, and everything it makes in that account-based pension is tax-free. So the key concept right here is while you're still in that TTR phase, there are more restrictions on how much you can draw, but once you are fully retired and you move to that account-based pension, the structure becomes more flexible and more tax effective. So looking at this case study, I've put up a hypothetical case study with Sophie that is 61, Mark is 63. If you were to take home income of 190,000 combined, after tax, it's roughly 140,000. They put in 22,800 of their employee contributions into super. They currently have a mortgage of 220,000 with an interest rate of 6.5%. Their current mortgage repayments are 23,000 per annum, and they're expected to repay this mortgage in 15 years. We've got some living expenses around 73,000 per annum, just as a comfortable level. And we've got spare cash flow of around 44,000, but this is often lost to lifestyle creep. So one of the strategies here we put in place is they look at that and we say, well, let's look at a TRIS strategy to help pay down this home loan before retirement and in a tax effective manner as well. So as you can see in the next slide, this is the current trajectory if they do use a TRIS strategy to pay down this mortgage. So they've aggressively paid down the mortgage. They've made it more tax efficient, putting that money into super as it's only taxed at 15% rather than their marginal tax rate. So this has allowed them to pay off their mortgage in 5 years instead of 15 years while using a TRIS strategy. This strategic approach obviously directs the extra 44,000 of previously leaked cash plus the tax savings towards their mortgage repayments, increasing their annual repayments from 23,000 to 65,000. So the result is it's eliminated in that 4-year period, instead of being 15 years, saving tens of thousands of interest while building their superannuation still. Here we have the 3-bucket cash flow design. So as you can see, we've got those 3 buckets there. The emergency fund is your first buffer. By this stage, you should have a dedicated emergency fund, which is touching on what Riley mentioned, at least 12 months as a minimum. The purpose is obviously those cover the unexpected expenses, such as car repairs, medical bills, house maintenance, to avoid selling down your growth assets during a market downturn. And without this buffer, you're going to need to sell those investments down. So the spending pattern we see in retirement, typically in retirement, the first 5 to 10 years is higher spending. And this is often around those ages of 60 to 75, depending on when you retire. And this is usually due to health and mobility are better at this age, and travel activity is higher. Then as we age, spending generally tapers off as lifestyle slows, although there can be outliers with people traveling into their 80s. So how do we plan for this? Your investment and drawdown strategy should recognize this front-loaded spending pattern. And this is where we apply this bucket strategy. So we got the living expenses bucket. This is that core fixed cost, covers non-negotiable expenses such as groceries, insurances for your home or car running costs, and fuel, private health, utilities, power, water, etc. And this is usually funded from more stable assets such as cash or bonds to provide that reliability. Then next, we look at the discretionary lifestyle bucket. And this covers wants such as travel, dining out, hobbies, entertainment, gifts, and other lifestyle choices. And this can tolerate a bit more variability as it may be linked partly to portfolio performance, and travel more when markets are strong. And then last, we've got your emergency bucket. So this is a separate pool for large, irregular surprises such as car breakdowns, hot water systems failing, urgent house repairs, or unexpected medical expenses. And this helps ensures your emergencies don't derail your lifestyle or your investment plan. So I'm going to pass it back to Riley to talk about the retirement event.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that, Sam. As Sam mentioned, I'm going to talk about the retirement event. So this is the biggest deal for most people. Now, it's something we're all going to go through. We're not going to work forever. But the switch to permanent retirement is, in my opinion, probably the most stressful part, because most people have worked for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years by the time this happens. Okay. Now, by this stage, all of our ducks should be in a row, right? We've planned very, very carefully. Now it should just be a matter of commencing income streams, switching things on, managing sequencing risk, and really just avoiding blowouts in early years. Okay. What I want to do before I get onto the dry stuff is show you a bit of a case study. Now, these are completely made up like set of facts and clients, but it really is a case study of what we see quite commonly as financial advisors. Now, to my right, so apologies if I'm not looking at you, we've got 2 clients. I've just gone Julie and John, or John and Julie, whatever way you like to say it. These clients have seen a financial advisor at least 5 years prior to sort of plan ahead, but now they're right at retirement. Let's just say for all intents and purposes, they have retired and they've come back to that financial advisor just to really rerun the numbers, do some checks and balances, and to get advice on what to do next. Now, John and Julie, they want to spend $75,000 per annum plus $20,000 per annum for the next decade, so 65 to 75, on travel, because there's plenty of countries they haven't been to and they want to spend time with the grandkids, for example. Now, they have a balanced target asset allocation or risk profile, and what that means is 70% of their superannuation is in growth assets like shares and property. Okay. Now, balanced, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but if you go and unpack a lot of industry super funds and their investments that say balanced, they're normally somewhere between 70 and 80% growth. Okay. They each have about $400,000 in superannuation. Now, you'll see on the screen here, there's and it's a bit blurry again, apologies for that. They start at $800,000 at 65. They're drawing down their living expenses each year. Around 67, they'd actually qualify for some form of part age pension based on the assets and income test. And then they're just slowly living off that age pension and then drawing down everything else that they need from superannuation. Now, this utilizes a 7.09% return after tax. When you retire, there is no tax, but 7.09%. So a very conservative level of return. And based on the straight line method of return, they're not running out of money. But we know, based on the sequencing risk that we spoke about earlier, we can have a whole different range of returns. We might have a period where they shoot the lights out in the first 5 years of retirement, right? They might retire and then COVID hits. So we don't know, but we can't control it, but at least if we're aware of it, it's going to empower us to make better decisions. So this is a Monte Carlo simulation, and you see there's bands of returns. So if I highlight this blue line here, right, that's the blue line that we saw before, or the straight line method of return. You can see if we shoot the lights out for a very long period of time, we statistically, based on a 90% confidence interval in stats, for anyone that did stats at university, we could shoot the lights out and have so much money at retirement relative to what they started with. It's still less than what they started with, but they'd be perfectly fine and have plenty left over at age 93. Alternatively, though, and this is what my job is as a financial advisor, is to go, well, if we don't get the returns, what's going to happen? And you'll see here at 83, 84, they actually could run out of money if the sequencing, which we can't control, goes poorly in the early stage of retirement. But this is empowering. It shows people, okay, well, if worse comes to worse, I might run out of money at 84 if things go pear-shaped, but I can prepare for that. Maybe I'll downsize. Maybe I'll do X, Y, Z. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, going back to the straight line method of return, they don't get a 7.09% return, they get a 6.3% return. So they take less risk. Okay. Well, we can see here that according to the straight line method, they're still going to be perfectly fine by taking less risk. So that's just a conversation going back to need, tolerance, and capacity. Okay. From there, we'd run Monte Carlos and show that. But this is what I want to point out the most. Control what we can control. And as I said, cash flow is king. So let's say, and this is really, really common, particularly for unadvised clients, we retire, budget blows out, or we didn't even know what the budget was, and we just, you know what I mean? Two people go from 40 hours a week work to free time, to holidays, to golf, to God knows what. And let's say they spend $15,000 more per year. Look at it now. As you can see, if I highlight that, based on the straight line method, not even the Monte Carlo simulation, they'll be out of money by age 83. Now, at that point, they will have to drastically drop their living expenses and live off an age pension. If they're happy to do that, go ahead. It's about making informed decisions. But informed is the key word there. I don't want to see people that go ahead and do this and then they go, oh, I wasn't aware. I can't believe I put myself in this position. Now, going back to the Monte Carlo, if we spend $15,000 more, have a look at it now. If we spend more and we get poor sequencing, we now could be out of money at 77, 78. Which is only 10 years after we're getting an age pension. There's no problems with these, but it's just important to get this done for yourself potentially, or for someone you love, because moving into retirement, there's so many variables, and having more and more information, right? As long as it's not analysis paralysis, but having lots of really good quality information is going to empower you to make the best decisions for yourself and your family and your partner. Now, back to the big retirement event. By now, we should have met a condition of release. And what I mean by condition of release is up until now, your superannuation is preserved, okay? But you've met a full condition of release, which for most people, they're over 60 and then they retire, or they're 65. So you now have unrestricted access to your superannuation. You can cash it all out and go to Europe. Don't do that. But now that we have retired, it's really, really important to recognize that the phases that are available to us within superannuation have changed. So traditionally, we were in the accumulation stage where we're taxed at 50%, you put money in, boss puts money in, and it grows, but it's also taxed. Now we can move to pension phase. And in pension phase, if you are commencing an account-based pension from 1 July 2025, so the financial year we're in at the moment, the transfer balance cap, which is the amount that you can start an account-based pension with, the threshold is $2 million per person that you can start that balance with. Now that can grow to $3 million. It can grow to $4 million. That's just the amount that you can start with in that tax-free phase. So we need to be aware of that, because if you're a couple, that's $4 million in assets in the tax-free phase that you can start with. So if you've got a $300,000 super balance and $7 million in property, there's probably some planning there in terms of what can be done to make things more efficient. But just to raise a final point there, the trick here, one of the tricks, in pension phase, we cannot receive contributions into this account once it's started. Only an accumulation phase account can accept contributions. So if you plan on stepping away from your high pressure corporate job, but maybe in a year or so, or 2 years, there might, like, you haven't locked anything in because your intention is to retire, but there might be some opportunity to do some local days down at the golf club or whatever you like to do, or the RSPCA, and they have to pay you for it, of course, which means they have to pay you super. You need to be aware that you need to have an accumulation account to accept those contributions. Okay? Now, moving forward, now that we know and we've got a really good understanding of the two different phases, you need to think about your family dynamic. Now, this is bordering on, if you have these sort of facts, you want to definitely get advice, but everybody's going to become eligible from an age perspective for an age pension at age 67. You might not get it because of assets and income, but theoretically, once you're 67, you can go and apply. So if there's a big age gap, let's say we've got a husband who's 67, wife 62. I just pick completely random metrics. If that husband, okay, is in the tax-free phase because over 65, when they go to apply for that age pension, their superannuation is going to count towards that under the assets test. However, if that wife's still working in an accumulation phase, for example, that person's superannuation is exempt from the assets test that their partner is going to apply for. Okay, accumulation phase and the family home are exempt assets, so you can use them quite wisely to maximize benefits. Okay, obviously by now we've wound back your risk pre-retirement. It should just really matter, as I said, be a matter of turning on payments. So at day one of retirement, or you should know a month in advance because you've given leave, you should know exactly what you need to spend. So it should just be a matter of switching it on, commencing the pension phase with your respective superannuation fund, setting up the pension payments that you want or need, okay? But the thing you need to be aware of is different superannuation funds pay at different frequencies. So I've seen superannuation funds that only pay on the 10th of every month. Other superannuation funds do offer fortnightly flexibility, but there's not a lot of superannuation funds out there that pay weekly. Very, very rarely do we see that. Okay, it's normally fortnightly and old school's monthly. So you need to be aware of, if you've lived off a weekly pay for the last 30, 40 years, and now it's monthly is all you have available to you, you need to tweak your budget. And not only do you need to tweak your budget, don't fall into the old trap of there's 4 weeks in a month, because you're going to become unstuck at some point in the year, because it doesn't work that way. Okay, as Sam alluded to earlier, we need to be aware of minimum drawdowns. So when we're commencing these accounts, we don't want to go, oh, I only need $50,000 a year if your minimum drawdown is $65,000, because we have to meet certain minimum amounts in order to remain in the tax-free phase. Now, if you're 60 to 64, your minimum drawdown rate is 4%. The year you turn 65, so if it's 1 July and you're 65, because you just turned 65, okay, your drawdown rate increases to 5%. At 75, it goes to 6%, and every 5 years thereafter, it goes up by 1% until it hits its limit. But we need to be aware of these minimum drawdown rates because you need to meet them, okay? Doesn't matter how you meet them. You might draw the minimum on a fortnightly basis. You might say, I need no money from this, and then just draw it out in the last month of the financial year, which is June, okay? Just being aware of that is key. And then from there, like Sam spoke about earlier, is implementing that bucket strategy. So you should have a lot of practice by now using your own pay, but now is crunch time. It really, really matters. So your pension payment comes in, boom, into the right buckets, smoothing out all your cash flows. You live off what you got, and you should have planned for that by now. You got your travel bucket, and so on and so forth. Now, as I said earlier, setting the honeymoon guardrails is really, really imperative. So be kind to yourself. Do your best to stick to a predefined budget, but also understand that it's your first time retiring. No one teaches you how to retire, okay? And it's natural for us to want to go out with our significant other or family and friends and go and do something. But when we're 10 years out, we can maybe let things slide for 6 months or a year, etc., and recover because we're working. Now that we're retired, there's no boss sending you money each week. So I encourage a lot of my clients in their first year of retirement, schedule a 90-day, maximum 6-month review with yourself or your significant other, just to review your spending, okay? We don't want to be going a year down the track and we go, oh, we budgeted for 65, but we spent 95, right? Because it's too late. Not being too strict, okay, is really key. But at the same time, as I said, we really want to find purpose with our newfound time. We don't want to be sitting inside trying to save money and flicking the lights off every 2 seconds and all that. Okay, it's all about balance. Be aware as well, pending the hobby that you like to do, and everyone's hobbies are completely different, you need to factor that in as well. So if you're sailing yachts and playing golf, it's going to be completely different to someone who likes to knit. Okay, don't forget about that. I'm now going to pass on to Sam here, who's going to take us through post-retirement. We're now getting a little bit more technical, so you might need to have a sip of coffee and switch on, but Sam's going to take you through something that is extremely, extremely important that most people have no idea about. So yeah, over to you, Sam.
Thanks for that, Ryan. As Riley highlighted, I think that honeymoon guardrails is really important, understanding your cash flow and spending habits in that first 6 months of retirement. Without further ado, I'll be looking at that post-retirement. So the main objectives here is keep your income sustainable, keep the taxes low, and we're looking at it making our intentions clear. So what happens to your super when you pass away? Super doesn't automatically follow your will. It's paid as a super death benefit. Some beneficiaries are treated as tax dependents, such as your spouse, young or financially dependent children, and they can often receive these benefits tax-free. Payments to non-tax dependents, so adults, financially independent children, siblings, or other relatives can be taxed. So who can receive super tax-free? Generally, spouses, dependent children are the main group, and then any other groups that don't fall in those categories, they will be taxed, and a super death benefits tax may apply. So how do we sort of use the financial planning opportunity to shift the taxable to the tax-free components? So there's often a window of opportunity between the ages of 60 and 75, depending when you've met a condition of release, whether that's retirement or reaching age 60. After age 75, though, there is a few more restrictions around getting money into super from a non-concessional contribution standpoint. So in this window, you may be able to recycle the taxable component into a tax-free component using withdrawal and recontribution strategies. So the aim here is to reduce the taxable portion that would be otherwise paid subject to the death benefits tax if it's paid to non-tax dependents. So how do we complete it, and what is a recontribution strategy? So we withdraw part of your super, often the taxable component, once eligible, and where tax rules apply, we recontribute it back into super as a non-concessional after-tax contribution. The recontributed amount generally becomes part of a tax-free component of your super balance, and this is subject to non-concessional contribution caps and bring forward rules that apply at the time. So as you can see with this diagram, we've got your superannuation account here made up of all the components. We convert it to a pension first. And the reason I like to do this is some people might be in a fund that offer a retirement bonus or a retirement booster. And this can be a couple extra grand, and it's usually subject to the fund you've been in, what sort of investment strategy you've been in, how long you've been in the fund, what taxes you've paid, and you can pick up a couple extra grand from doing this. So I think it's really worthwhile. Start the pension, do a full withdrawal into your personal bank account, and then we just put it all back into your superannuation account and then commence that pension, and it's all tax-free, or it could be partially tax-free, depending on your situation and how much money you have. So why does this matter for your family? Well, in Australia, is that kind of quasi-death tax inside of super. Many people first discover it when the ATO issues you a tax assessment on a death benefit you've received. So with an adult non-dependent beneficiary, they can face tax on taxable components of that super death benefit. So obviously with a tax-free component, zero tax for anyone that receives it. And then there's that taxable component taxed element. And that can be up to 17%, made up of 15% tax plus a 2% Medicare levy. And then there's the taxable component untaxed element. And that can be up to 32%, 30% tax plus 2% Medicare levy. So for example, if someone had $100,000 and it was all taxable component untaxed, you're looking at a $32,000 payment if it goes to adult children that are not dependent on you. So by increasing that tax-free component through your recontribution, the portion exposed to these rates can be reduced or in some cases eliminated. So why is this important? Well, most people would prefer their children or chosen beneficiaries to receive as much as possible rather than a significant share going to the ATO. So a well-structured recontribution strategy tailored to your situation can help improve after-tax outcomes for the next generation and help you align the estate and your values and intentions, and not just the default government tax settings. Next, I'd like to talk around the estate planning essentials. So your core estate planning documents. So we're keeping your will, which basically sets out how your estate is to be distributed, enduring power of attorney, so who can make financial legal decisions if you lose capacity, advanced healthcare directive, so guidance on future medical treatment, end of life preferences. And then you want to review and update these after major life events, such as marriage, retirement, divorce, separation, a new child or grandchild, significant asset purchase or sales, buying or selling a family home, investment, property, etc., or major changes in your health. Then you want to look at your superannuation. Is your binding death benefit nomination up to date and reflective of your wishes? And remember, your superannuation is a non-estate asset, so make sure the right person is receiving your superannuation. Looking at a reversionary pension. So once you've started an account-based pension, you can put a reversionary pension that basically allows, if you do pass away, it can go to the surviving spouse and still stay in that account-based pension, which is really tax-friendly. And the important point here is super sits outside of the estate, so it might not be controlled solely by your will unless you specify it in your binding death benefit nomination. So making sure your finances and your legal planning match. Your financial plan, who you want to benefit and how debts are repaid, how income for a spouse is maintained, should be consistent with your legal documents. So I have another example I've had recently. A misalignment came with a couple. They had their couple's superannuation death benefit nomination split between their children and their partner. But one of their stated goals is something was to happen. They wanted that super to be paid to the surviving partner to clear the home loan. Under this existing nomination, the benefit would be divided between the children and the surviving partner, so there'd be insufficient funds to pay for that mortgage. So the outcome here is the structure didn't match their intentions and would have created a financial strain at an already difficult time. The aim here is the left hand, the finances, and the right hand, the legal structures are working together. So the right money goes to the right people at the right time in a tax-aware way. It's covered everything from my end. I'm going to pass it over to Riley to wrap this up with some Q&A.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much for that, Sam. Very, very helpful. And although that last section there in the recontribution strategy, some people find it dry, it's also very, very technical. But yeah, I find a lot of people get to 75, for example, and then they start to think about this stuff, like what sort of legacy am I going to leave? And then they realize, oh, there's super death benefits tax. What do you mean by that? My partner's already passed away. And we go, oh, well, if you pass it on to adult children, which by then all the children are adults, 17% of that beautiful taxable component, which for most people is all their super balance, is going to go to the ATO. And then they go, that's horrible. Really? How do I get rid of that? And the unfortunate thing is, once you're over 75, it's almost impossible to rinse. Okay. So in the very fine window between 60 and 75, 60 if you're retired, if not at 65. Yeah, but there's a 10 to 15 year window there where we need to be getting that sort of stuff done. Yeah, onto the Q&A. So nothing's come through whilst we've been talking. That's perfectly fine, extremely common. But one thing that we do want to run through here is that we've been posting on LinkedIn. I'm sure that's how some of you have seen about this. We've got a bit of a bank of questions that were sent through, either comments left on our posts or they were DM through for people that are going to watch the video. So we're going to go through them now for everybody that's tuning in at home. The first question here, I'm going to throw to you, Sam. So they'll probably understand this answer by the time they watch the recording, but they've asked, how much should I keep in cash once I'm retired?
A great question, Riley. It really just comes down to your situation. Like we mentioned, we'd like to see around 12 months once you're retired. Ideally, we want to sort of map that out and make sure you understand that and what sort of planning we can put in place and modeling that. It really comes down to, can you put your head on the pillow at night and still sleep comfortably if there is a down market, and what sort of outcome do you want to happen if that does occur? And can you live off that 12 months of income that you got there sitting in liquid cash? So great question. The next one we've got passed into us was, what happens to my super if I pass away, and who gets it, and is there tax? I'll pass this one to you, Rob.
Yep, great question. So we've touched upon it in certain sections, but I'll try and condense it into a 30-second answer. The first thing we need to be aware of is that your superannuation can only go to certain people. It's designed to provide for your retirement, or if you pass away, your spouse. Okay, so it can go to your spouse or an ex-spouse, a minor child, an adult child, or your will. And you need to be aware that super death benefits tax applies depending on who it goes to. So for the simplest way to round this out, if it goes to your spouse, okay, tax-free, that's perfectly fine. But once it goes to an adult child, which is the most common thing in society, husband passes away, for example, wife follows hopefully many years later, and then from there it goes to the children, that's when super death benefits tax will apply unless you've done something about it. So it's really, really important to make sure that one, we're aware of this, but two, we're also aware of the fact that superannuation is a non-estate asset. Sam mentioned it before. So many people I see aren't aware of this and they go, oh, my super, is it not dealt with via my will? That's if they have a will. Most people don't have a will as well. But no, it's not. Your superannuation fund actually makes the decision about who it will go to. They can only pay to one of those categories, like I said before, but they're the ones that make the final decision about who it goes to, unless you give them a binding nomination to tell them this is where it must go to. But I'd encourage you all to do your own research as well. Superannuation funds have been in the news in the last 12 months and beyond, holding on to death benefits, and they've been fined for it. They love to do it off the record, and they like to hold on to that because they can make more money off your money. But please make sure that this aspect of your chessboard is sorted, because the last thing we want is a mourning spouse who also needs your life insurance and your superannuation. So there's financial stress and emotional stress. Third question, we do have 5 that were sent in earlier. Third question, this one's back at you, Sam. Is a TTR, transition to retirement, or a TRIS still worth it if I'm debt free?
A good question. The short answer is yes, but it really depends on your situation. What sort of outcomes do you want to achieve? What's your goal leading into retirement? Do you want to scale back work and possibly drop a day but still keep the same income? Do you want to look at ways to increase your superannuation while you're still working and still have that same income coming in? It's really a case by case, and it's really where you need personal advice to sort of bottle this out and give you sort of some outcomes that could occur. And then look at that and say, well, I'm happy to go ahead with that. Debt free is obviously great leading into retirement, but hopefully that answers your question. If you do want to reach out further, you can always contact myself or Riley to discuss. I'll pass on to the last question we got here. I'll give this one to Riley. Can I get money into super once I start a pension? What if I go back to work for a few years in retirement?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start with the first part. Can you get money into super once you've started a pension? Now, a lot of industry super funds have identified that this is a problem for people. So when you commence a pension, they're actually leaving the accumulation account open for 18 months or so. In case you do need to make a last minute contribution, then it can go into the accumulation account. Okay. But by default, the thing you need to be aware of is your tax-free pension phase account cannot receive money. So if you're, let's say you're 70 years of age and all your money's in that pension phase and you get an inheritance and you might go, oh, I want to put it in my super, right? I've got no debt. I just want to put it in my super. Obviously get advice. This is just factual information, but it can't go straight into your pension account. So we need to be aware, right, that it needs to go into an accumulation account. Then your pension may need to go back to accumulation phase where the two accounts are consolidated potentially, and then you recommence the pension. Alternatively, you can have 2 pension accounts if you just put it in and recommence another pension. So there's a few technical things that you want to be aware of there, but no, money can't go in to your pension account. So don't go and give your boss, if you go back and do some part-time work, your pension details, because the contribution that they make will bounce back to their bank account, and I'd almost promise you that they won't even notice and you'll never get the money. The second part of Sam's question there was, what if I go back to work a few years into retirement? Well, there's a few very interesting things you need to be aware of there. The first thing is, if you are 60 and retired, theoretically, by law, you need to have the intention to remain retired. Okay? You can't retire for a day and go straight back to work. So you need to actually have the intention to stay retired. Now, that doesn't say you can't go back to work. There's plenty of people that retire at 60, 2 years on, they go, I'm going to go work at the golf club or at the RSPCA or whatever it may be. That is perfectly fine. You can go back to work a few years into retirement. Just need to make sure your money's going into that accumulation account. That wraps us up for the questions. The last one there, I won't ask Sam. That was just completely, it was answered by the question, so that's perfectly fine. In terms of your next 3 moves for everyone that's here live today and tuning in online via the recording, there's 3 things that you guys can take from today and practically do. The first thing is completing your personal checklist. So as I said, that's going to go out from section 1 today to you. after today, okay? And that's that checklist that you can go through everything. Then from there, once you've completed your checklist, book in a retirement readiness review. If there's anything on your chessboard that you feel is too confusing or it worries you, or you don't know how the pieces fit, or whether you need this or should do that, or there's analysis paralysis, right? And we don't expect you to be financial advisors. Now, Sam and I are doing 30-minute retirement readiness reviews. For anyone that wants it, you can reach out. Okay. There'll also, I believe, be a link sent to you if you do want to book in, completely free. Sit down with us for 30 minutes. We can go through your checklist or any questions you may have. Okay. Now, last thing, grab additional resources. Start with quality resources. Don't start with TikTok and Instagram and social media. Go to Money Smart. I'd also encourage you to check out our website. We post on there multiple times a week on a blog, which is going to give you a lot of information exactly like we've presented today. From there, we also have LinkedIn. We're extremely active on there and teaching people. And I'd also encourage you on our LinkedIn, if you check out our main pages, we have a lot of free resources that we give to people. Property calculators, budget templates, the list goes on. We're constantly working on free resources to give to our clientele. That's really it today, everyone. Thank you all for attending. We, as a business, are aiming to do webinars at least quarterly at an absolute minimum. You'll also be able to check Sam out on Instagram. Sam's very active on there, giving a lot of good quality content away on Instagram. Myself, I do TikTok. It's painful, but I do it. Short videos designed to help build up your levels of financial education. All of our content also gets reposted on YouTube. And then all of our advisors at Cruise are very, very active on LinkedIn, where you'll primarily find us, okay? You can subscribe to the business's newsletter and so on and so forth. That goes out once a month and it's full of gold. But outside of that, we'll leave you to it. And I hope that you all have a lovely afternoon if you're in Queensland as well now, not on daylight savings time. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for attending.